call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Excused.
Jeff?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Kurt?
Here.
Brandy? Here.
Okay. There's 5 members present, and Member Borough is calling in, and Member Norheim is excused. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, that moves us to item 3 on today's agenda, and that's approval of minutes from a regular meeting October 1st and a special meeting October 5th. We'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second. Is there any changes? Don't see any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we've approved those.
Aye.
That brings us to item 4, amendment and approval of today's meeting agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve today's meeting agenda if there are no amendments.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Walhooter to approve today's agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move forward with the agenda we have before us. Public hearings. Today we have one public hearing, and it's a public hearing for ordinance 2018-18. This is an ordinance amending the Petersburg Municipal Code by repealing Titles 18, Subdivision, and 19, Zoning, and adopting a new Borough Development Code. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to participate in today's public hearing for this topic? Please step to the microphone, state your name and who you represent, please.
I'm hoping this is the right time to speak. I'm Mary Coppice, and I'm representing myself, and I wanted to talk about one of the additions proposed in the development code. Is this the right time?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, I never thought I'd say such a thing. I'm actually quite excited by a lot of the additions that are proposed in this development code, and in particular, I commend the section that allows for food production via market gardens in the borough. Small-scale agricultural enterprises, as permitted in this section, are an important step in increasing our self-sufficiency as a community and in fortifying and diversifying our local economy. However, I find the code as written has a major oversight that prevents it from achieving its stated goal. The proposed code lays out thoughtful and thorough regulations for small-scale agricultural enterprises to ensure that they are, quote, at a scale that is appropriate to neighborhoods, and to, quote, ensure that their uses and activities are compatible with the surrounding area by limiting potential negative effects, particularly in residential neighborhoods. It addresses everything from the market garden's appearance and character to noise, fumes, traffic, and more. Given this great attention to ensuring market gardens are compatible with existing neighborhoods, I'm confused why the vast majority of neighborhoods in the borough, both specifically in low, medium, and high-density residential zones, are not currently included as permitted with special or conditional use. Should a market garden comply with these reasonable regulations that take pains to preserve a neighborhood's character, I believe it should be allowed to operate in residential zones on land that is not currently developed, which is also stated in the code. Therefore, I'm asking the Assembly to add high, medium, and low-density residential zones to the current list of permitted or conditional use areas for market gardens. I thank you for considering this addition to the proposed code and for your work in reviewing, amending, and approving this rather lengthy document. I think it has great potential to add vitality to our shared community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience today that would like to participate in today's public hearing on ordinance 2018-18? Seeing none. Debbie, you have a few things to read? And I would suggest, Mary, if you email your request to Liz, then she'll have it, and at the last meeting we'll address all the proposed changes.
Thank you. This is from Bo Varsano with Farragut Farms. I am very appreciative of the consideration given to market gardening in the new Petersburg Development Code. Overall, the code's wording around this issue provides a lot of support for micro-scale farming in our borough. but by limiting market gardens only to areas zoned as commercial and rural residential, the new code would, in practical application, push all market gardening out of Petersburg's core area. There is a growing trend nationwide for small micro farms to be located in the midst of residential neighborhoods very similar to those found in Petersburg. These tiny market gardens are often placed in residential yards, and frequently urban farmers lease several yards from various owners to patch together enough land to make a viable business. A location amidst a densely populated area has numerous benefits both to the operator and the surrounding neighborhood. The grower has a highly accessible presence that allows for making strong connections with the farm's customer base. Market gardens are often visually attractive, provide a little neighborhood diversity, are generally much more quietly maintained than a lawn, and give the neighborhood's residents, especially the kids, direct exposure to the interesting and educational process of growing vegetables. I landed my first job at age 10 picking blueberries at a local farm. I could ride my bike there and work there as long as I liked. At a nickel a pint, I didn't get rich picking blueberries, but the lessons learned about work ethics, independence, and responsibility have lasted a lifetime. If the farm had been far from home, this invaluable experience would not have been available. These days, keeping our kids exposed to and engaged in constructive activities close to home is more important than ever. By limiting market gardens to commercial and rural areas, everyone in high, medium, and low-density residential zones is denied the opportunity to make a few bucks growing something adjacent to their residence or on their vacant lot. What about the retired folks who want to put a you-pick raspberry patch in their backyard? The stay-at-home parent who wants to put up a greenhouse and gain a little income selling lettuce to the local school lunch program? The ambitious commercial grower whose business plan doesn't pencil out if they are forced to purchase an expensive commercial lot for their greenhouse-based salad greens operation. I'm not saying there is a lot of this happening right now, but wouldn't Petersburg be a better place to live if these businesses were allowed to develop in the future? As it is currently written, the Development Code would make all of these examples impractical or disallowed. I urge the Borough Assembly to amend the Development Code to allow for market gardening in low, medium, and high-density residential areas. Thanks for your time and consideration of my opinion. Bo Varsano. And one more from Marya Smets, also with Farragut Farm. My name is Marya Smets, and I am writing on behalf of myself and my business, Farragut Farm. We would like to offer feedback on the proposed zoning changes, specifically regarding market gardens' special use standards. We are happy and grateful that Petersburg wants to encourage local food production by providing room for food production within city limits. Farming is by no means a lucrative business, and growing food in Southeast Alaska is not an easy or straightforward task, given the challenges presented by climate, geography, and cost of transportation. If we want to see more food being produced locally, then we need to remove as many barriers as possible for aspiring farmers in our region. By supporting small farmers, we bolster economic development within our community and create more opportunity for Petersburg residents to eat fresh and nutritious food. Excuse me. As the code is currently written, it would only be permissible for someone to establish a market garden that is less than 10,000 square feet on downtown commercial, general commercial, and rural residential plots. We would like to propose that the wording be changed to also include low, medium, and high-density residential zones to this allowance. I apologize. Currently, there are very few in-town vacant lots available that are both commercially zoned and suitable for a small market garden or farm, which essentially forces all new potential operations to be located out the road. We would like to see the opportunity for market gardens to be established within city limits, so families can be personally connected to where their food is grown by walking by on their way to school or when they are out for a walk with their dog.
Clerk Thompson, do you want me to finish reading that for you?
Thank you. Yes. I appreciate it.
You bet. It should be noted that a market garden has to meet special use standards, which puts limits on noise, fumes, and visual impacts in residential zones, making sure the operation is compatible with the neighborhood character. A market garden will also likely have the need to connect to the power and water systems, providing regular income for Petersburg utilities, just as if a new house were built on the same lot. Again, we are asking to change the proposed code language so that market gardens of 10,000 square feet or less are permitted on all classifications of residential zoning rather than just rural residential. That means that market gardens greater than 10,000 square feet would continue to only be allowed on general commercial lots with special standards and rural residential and downtown commercial lots with special use standards, as well as a conditional use permit. Let's take a step towards promoting local food production in Petersburg by opening the door as wide as possible to potential market gardeners. Our community will be better fed because of it. Sincerely, Maria Smets.
Okay, and we had, well, we'll read this letter and views related to items on the agenda. All right, is there anyone else that would like to participate in today's public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is bid awards. There are no bid awards today, so that moves us to item 7, visitors' views related to items on today's agenda. So I'd like a show of hands, how many people would like to participate so we can kind of get a... Kevin, I think we should limit it to 3 minutes, so whoever wants to come first, please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
Hi, my name's Joe Sebastian. I'm here representing myself. This is in regard to the letter that Assembly Member Lynn has proposed in Section E. Several years ago, Dahlstrom Round Log Export Company from Klawock was kind enough to help clean out 300 to 500-year-old trees from the Tonka road system. This company stands accused of violating the Forest Service stewardship contract by high-grading the best and leaving the rest. The logs and trees, now gone, and estimates up to $1 million loss on the stewardship program, left the borough projects empty-handed. Another problem for the U.S. Forest Service was there was no rug big enough to sweep this whole mess under. The U.S. Forest Service is a federal agency that guards its secrets of management of public forest lands like secrets of the CIA. You can hardly get a straight answer out of the agency about anything. But the fact is, deliberate and dishonest malfeasance of timber contract and fraud took place on the Tonka timber sale. The scope of this brazen and criminal fraud is more than just a few U.S. Forest Service, and to quote Assembly Member Lynn's letter, administrative deficiencies. Somehow, the high grading of rare and valuable trees on the Petersburg Borough did not interest this assembly. They passed on sending a letter of inquiry to the Forest Service. They passed on requesting a forensic audit of the sale. This assembly chose negligence over accountability. Now, a watered-down letter, scented with Kool-Aid, has been drafted as a tepid response to a serious crime. The softball letter looks more like buying into the ongoing cover-up and less like the assembly doing its duty of borough oversight and management. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Are there more hands? Just whoever wants to come first. Becky, you want to come up?
Hi, Becky Knight here, representing myself. And I have to protest the constriction of time based on the previous earlier testimony that received longer time. I prepared my testimony for 5 minutes. It's been 2.5 years since the Forest Service identified in a high-level report apparent misadministration and maladministration of 2 local timber sales, which directly impacted our community. Yet, they have been completely silent on the matter. The borough ought to be outraged, not conciliatory. During the last Assembly meeting, you failed to approve a resolution regarding the review due to its claimed negative tone. Negative or not, the verbiage was lifted directly from the review. Use of the agency's own words and in a firm, respectable voice is not only professional, but sends a clear message that not only the agency, but the Bureau expects results, not spin. I predict a timid letter of inquiry will be met with a similar nothing burger response, and the issue will drag on for years. Memories will fade, and those involved will and have moved on. In the meantime, huge timber sales are being planned, some soon to be executed, yet the public has received absolutely no assurance of ecologic or economic accountability. And I went on to review the lack of, or the silence on part of the agency in my longer letter, but to keep it shorter. In effect, there has been a complete information backlog, a blackout from the agency. That is, until Assemblymember Lynn contacted local agency personnel just prior to the last Assembly meeting. His immediate access to information was quite surprising given the agency's long-standing silence. But this is an inadequate approach. All Assembly members and the public should hear what agency personnel have to say, and all Assembly members should have an opportunity to ask questions. With all due respect to Mr. Lynn's efforts, the Assembly and the public deserve an in-person official update, and it really should be from a high level in the Washington office, preferably the Forest Service Chief or Deputy Chief, telephonically if necessary. Such an invitation should be included in any communication with them. Also, I request that Mr. Lynn please identify the agency officials he had spoken with, on what dates, whether those communications were in person or via phone, and what, if any, documents have been provided to him. And also regarding the CCs at the bottom of the draft letter, Beth Pendleton retired several months ago. Dave Schmid is the current acting regional 10 forester. And so far the agency replies have been at best evasive. While at a meeting on October 3rd in Washington, D.C., I made a one-on-one inquiry with Acting Deputy Chief of the Forest Service, Chris French, and he was equally vague. During our conversation, Mr. French offered only that, quote, oversight is happening and that he could not comment on anything, end quote, even when I specifically asked if there would be a report to which the public could access. Given the agency's full awareness of this debacle should be called into question. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Whoever wants to come up next, please take the podium, state your name, who you represent.
My name is Joan Keltzer, and I represent myself. And I guess to agree with the last two speakers, I think Assemblyman Lynn's letter is not adequate in addressing this issue. As Americans, we are all shareholders in our public lands. We have the right to demand transparency and accountability in the practices that manage them. When these public lands fall within the boundaries of our borough, there's an added layer of ownership and an enhanced stakeholdership. As our elected officials, you have the responsibility to represent the interests of the people of this borough and be assertive with the Forest Service to find out just what happened with the Tonka sale. It's our right to know how Dahlstrom was in breach of contract and exactly how that affects revenues due to the borough. Ignoring this issue is setting a bad precedent and a double standard. In a fiscal era of squeezing every last revenue source for a dime, it's irresponsible not to pursue this giant low-hanging fruit. It's insult enough that the Forest Service allows the cutting of old growth when the world needs it to suck up CO2. It's further insult that the majority of these logs are being exported round, robbing this region of employment, resources, and fish and wildlife habitat. But it's absolutely a slap in the face to the commercial fishing town when the vehicle to fix fisheries habitat degradation from past timber sales is tied to current badly managed timber sales. An official from the agency needs to address the council and explain exactly what's being done and a timeline for answers. If any of us were late on our property taxes, we'd be subject to immediate fines. Dahlstrom needs to be fined for his breach of contract, and the Forest Service needs to compensate the borough. I don't understand why the council is being so meek with the Forest Service, but I do understand that inaction by this body is negligence. Thank you. This is not a referendum on you guys. I really appreciate all of you guys serving as councilmen, but it's important to pursue this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Whoever would like to step forward next, if there's more people in the audience that would like to testify. Views related to items on today's agenda is where we're at.
Hi, my name's Scott Hersey. I'm representing myself. This is in regards to the change in the clarification of the borough sales tax regarding cruise passengers. And I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting, so I wasn't able to hear your discussions on where the council is sitting on this at the moment. But reading that there's a proposal to exempt anyone who comes into town and pays the head tax would be exempt from paying sales tax. And it seems to me that that's kind of backwards. It should be that people that are paying the sales tax would be exempt from paying the head tax. But I mean, if it was... I run a business here, and I pay the full 6% sales tax on all my passengers, unless it comes up to the $1,200 limit. And during the day trips now, most of them don't. When I was doing the longer trips, I got ahead of myself here, but if I had the choice to make, I would rather pay the head tax too and not pay the full sales tax. And so I don't quite understand giving the breaks to these bigger companies coming in and saying that they don't, if they can opt to pay a $5 tax instead of $72. I'm not saying. I'm all for getting as much money as we can from the visit industry, but I think it should be fair to the local businesses and to the outside interest at the same time. When we ran our trips, we were told, when this issue first came up, the vote went that the city was going to start charging us tax on trips that we were formerly exempt from. And we were told that it didn't matter how long we were inside the city limits. If the trip started here, we paid sales tax on the full amount. I heard some discussion about that some boats are paying for part of the time, only the time they're in the borough, but that was not the original intent of the law. And so I'm a little confused. And when we started, we would be in the city limits for about 10 minutes of our trip, but yet paid the full tax on the whole time. So I'm a little confused about what's being said here, whether the people that are coming to town, and if they choose to pay the head tax, they're not having to pay the sales tax, or I thought it was everyone who started a trip here. If you brought, if you started your trips here, you paid the sales tax. And so I guess I'm just looking for some clarification, and hoping that we don't do something that would penalize the local businesses. I mean, those companies bring in a lot of money into town, but I spend all my money here. On a passenger per passenger basis, I'm paying a lot more sales tax than they would be, than the head tax. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I just want to make it fair for the locals. If you do something like this, give us the option to pay the head tax and not the sales tax if that's the way you want to go. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Have you talked to Jody, our clerk, at all about it and try to get clarification where we're at on this?
No, not yet. I was wondering if Jody was the one to talk to get the clarification, because when it came up, the discussion about how much time people spend in the borough limits, whether that would be the percentage of the sales tax they'd be paying. My impression, and what I was told when this law first went into effect, that it didn't matter. If you started your trip here, you paid the sales tax. So,
And just,
has that been changed? I don't know.
Jody, has any of that changed? I mean,
Well, I guess it's a bigger conversation than just right now. I think maybe we
is
should
this,
look at it.
let me look farther into the agenda, is this an ordinance we're going to change that would take, so this is going to take 3 readings. There'll be a public hearing at the next meeting as well, and then there'll be more time to talk about it then, and maybe after the discussion today and at that public hearing, we'll have more of a clarification, because I'm a little bit confused as well. But from a message from our attorney, it'd be awful hard to charge, if I'm not wrong, maybe Jody can step in here to figure out how to determine how much time a person spent within our borough.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when the law first went into effect, that was one thing that we talked about was, we leave the dock, and at that time, the city limits ended at the end of the Narrows, and so 10 minutes we're out at the end of the Narrows. Yet we were paying full sales tax on the whole trip because we started it here.
Right. But there will be more discussion at the second reading of this meeting, which will be, I'm assuming, the 19th of November, and then the third and final reading on this ordinance will be the first meeting in December.
Okay.
So that would be, the public hearing might be a better time to get, and maybe we'll have more accurate information by then.
Yeah. And that's right now. I mean, I'm just looking for some clarification and hoping.
Scott, come in and visit me today, this week, anytime, and we'll talk about it. I would like to pick your brain about the, historical use of this tax on charters.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to testify to views on today's agenda?
My name is David Beebe. I'm representing myself. Mr. Mayor and fellow Assembly members, I regret not being able to attend and testify at the last Assembly meeting due to my fall commercial fishing season. So the following comments are in response to statements made and Assembly actions taken during the October 15th discussions on a failed borough resolution. As we know, a standing gag order has been in effect on this matter and strictly enforced by the Petersburg District Ranger on a former Assembly member, as well as any federal employee of the district. Despite a 2.5-year agency refusal to address the findings of the Washington office investigation team, Assembly discussion and actions have occurred in the absence of official agency responses to the Washington office activity review. I'd like to address the elephant in the room here. Agency-enabled large-scale timber theft is not new on the Tongass. This latest activity review simply provides the most recent circumstantial evidence of that possibility. It should be noted the Timber Theft Investigations Branch was created during Member Lynn's tenure as supervisor and later director of forest management in D.C. Unfortunately, despite several successful convictions by the investigation branch, the chief of the Forest Service disbanded the Timber Theft Investigations Branch in 1994 before they could reach convictions on the Tongass. With all due respect to Member Lynn, the mayor, and the rest of the Assembly, I'm questioning the prudence of Assembly votes based upon hearsay testimony of a former Tongass Forest Supervisor and current Assembly member. Evidence of agency maladministration and circumstantial evidence of agency-enabled large-scale timber theft should understandably provoke, in Member Lynn's own words, real heartburn and a need to look at it in a positive way. Unfortunately, there's nothing positive about the evidence provided by the Washington Office Activity Review. According to former BLM Deputy Chief of Law Enforcement Dennis McLean, I quote, "Theft of any government property worth more than $1,000 is a felony crime. Another federal statute called misprision of a felony makes it a felony crime for any person who knows of a felony offense and does not report it to the U.S. Attorney.
Because the monetary values of timber are so high, the combination of these statutes makes any timber theft a criminal matter that should be investigated by the special agents and referred to the U.S. Attorney either for prosecution or declination, end quote. Notably, Lynn's fellow line officer, Ketchikan Area Supervisor Michael Lunn, was referenced in the 1996 Pure White paper titled Stealing the Tongass. I quote, "In 1990, Tongass National Forest Supervisor Michael Lunn reported to regional management evidence of illegality that had been frustrating him since 1988 when he assumed the post," end quote. So it's entirely reasonable to question whether Member Lynn is speaking on behalf of the agency who was once highly placed.
Mr. Beebe, it's been 3.5 minutes. If you could please wrap it up.
Yes, I will. Or whether he's speaking on behalf of the best interests of all public owners of the National Forest System and borough government. There exists a reasonable doubt as to the capability of this agency to follow its own laws it is charged with enforcing. In the absence of any adequate information provided either by the news media or by the agency itself, I'm requesting an opportunity to be on the agenda of the next meeting in order to provide a 15-minute presentation on the results of my investigative research. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to views related to today's agenda, items on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Should I read this?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you want me to read it, Debbie?
Would you?
Yeah,
Thank you. I
sorry.
appreciate it. I'm sorry.
We have a letter here today from Eric Lee, Mr. Mayor and Petersburg Assembly. This letter regards the draft letter to the Forest Service, which is on the agenda today. I can't attend the meeting today, but would like to add these comments to the discussion. I feel the wording of the letter could be clearer and stronger if the Assembly knew exactly what Bob Lynn was told by the Forest Service officials he called and talked to, as he stated the last time this issue was discussed by the Assembly. As I recall, he stated that he was told by the officials that they were looking into it, and the fact that they were looking into it was his main reason for urging the Assembly to vote against the resolution. The letter he drafted states that we understand that there also have been requests for follow-up investigations and that there may be an internal ongoing investigation. If the Assembly learned more specifically what he was told, the Assembly would be better informed in choosing the best wording for this letter. The letter should request specific information on what is currently being done and what is being found specific to the different aspects of this issue. This is important because more generalized, non-specific wording will surely result in a less informative, more generalized reply. I also feel it is important that the letter requests regular periodic updates on the findings of the ongoing internal investigation. Thank you for your consideration of these suggestions, Eric Lee. And that was the only written testimony we had today relating to items on today's agenda. So that brings us to visitors' views unrelated to items on today's agenda. Is there anybody in the audience that has views? Please come forward and state your name, and then Ms. Latumsky, you can be next, and then the harbor master has something to say.
My name is Martha Smith, and I speak for myself. I've been attending Assembly meetings for years, 20 years now, and I'm curious about language, and I'm going to call for a consideration of a change in language. I am not a visitor. I live here. I am a resident. I am a citizen. And I resent being referred to as a visitor who comes to express an opinion. So I would request a change in how your agenda is worded, that it be asking for residents' views related to the agenda or citizens' views related to the agenda, not a visitor. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hello.
My name is Mara Lutomsky. I'm here representing the Chamber of Commerce. And I just wanted to put it out there that we're inviting you all, the Assembly member, and all of the listening public to attend the visitor discussion that is happening tomorrow night. Yes, we know it's election night. It's at 5:30 p.m. at the Assembly Chambers. It'll be a round table type discussion where Viking Travel will give a presentation, and then there will be time to voice any concerns or ask any questions if you have any questions regarding the cruise industry. And there will also be an opportunity for you to put in formal written comments or written concerns, written suggestions, as well as sign up for a possible task force that may look at this issue in the future. So, we're always looking for volunteers to help. So I just want to remind you again, tomorrow night, Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. at the Borough Assembly Chambers. We will try and have you out of here by 7 p.m. so everyone can hear the election results. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Gloria Ann Wallen. I live at 909 Sandy Beach Road. I'm here representing myself and also to protest this whole daylight savings thing. Light at 7 o'clock this morning, going home in the dark. And so I was talking with my friend Tamara Evans about, what we do to get through this time of the year. And she's putting up her Christmas, her seasonal lights already. And it looks really nice along her driveway. And she said, yeah, I do it because it just feels cozier. And I agree with her. It looks great. And so I'm coming today to ask you to consider possibly, I've mentioned this to Carl in the past, discount off people's electrical bill for those that put up lights during maybe the months between November and early March. They do this in other communities, I know, and I just think it would help turn neighborhoods into inviting, interesting, warm, and cozy places. And maybe I'm just here really to ask you to do anything to encourage year-round residency here in Petersburg. I know we're always looking for ways to cut expenses, but I'd like you to consider an annual discussion on what it takes to encourage vibrant year-round residency in our community. Some have been calling me romantic, that, the days that I grew up here are changing, and that I'm not embracing that change as well as I should be. It seems to me that we're really doing a lot to encourage the seasonal retirement community that's developing here in our community. As I came to work this morning, I noticed that there were 21 houses along the waterfront in my neighborhood that are dark. And so, anyway, I just was one of those kind of fun things that maybe we can do as a borough to encourage people to just show their little bit of pride and maybe turn their little neighborhood into an inviting place. So, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience with visitors with views unrelated to items on the agenda today? Okay, seeing no other interest, we'll move to board, commission, and committee reports. There's nothing listed there. We have two items on the consent agenda. The first one is the preliminary fiscal year 2020 budget calendar, and the second one is renewal of federal lobbyist contract. It's the will of the Assembly. We could handle them separately, or we could do them as two items on the consent agenda. I looked it over. I don't see too many changes from last year's schedule, is there, Jody? No, so it's the same schedule for...
Yeah, and I mainly send out the schedule just so anyone that's new to the Assembly can kind of see what the timeline is for the budget process. And also, I really want you to take a look at the meetings in May and June of next year, where you're approving the budget or making changes to. If those don't work, I don't know how far you plan ahead, we might need to change those and move them up. But we can always change it at a later date as well. So.
Okay, so that's pretty much standard.
Just the budget needs to be approved by the 15th of June.
So before we have any more discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the two items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Member Gregor, seconded by Member Lynn Stanton Gregor, excuse me, Jay.
No problem.
To adopt these two items on the consent agenda. The second item is a contract with the lobbyist, the federal lobbyist, for $3,000 a month. Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the borough, the budget calendar, I know we've done it like this in the past, but for several of us who are out of town from the end of March through the summertime, I wonder if there's a possibility of rescheduling this so that some of the requests and the community organization, the workshops that we have with them could be going on in December or January, just so that we'd have an opportunity to be here, and all of us who are involved in fishing industry will be gone usually probably the end of March, and it'd be nice if we could have that discussion while we're all in town here over the winter. That's my request.
So would that create any grief to your schedule,
Well,
Finance Director?
normally you have work sessions after the preliminary budget goes out.
Right.
And it takes a few months for the department heads to work the numbers and to get a feel for, the later you push it back into the fiscal year and it gets closer to June, the more accurate it tends to be, because we hear more about what the decisions that are being made in Juneau in the legislature, and it just is a more accurate document. But we could definitely have some type of work session preliminary earlier on, maybe February or something. Does that work, Jeff, do you think?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks, Jody. The issue for me is that we're already circulating, or we're hearing from Steve about some ideas that we might want to consider when we're talking about either reducing things or making changes in certain departments. And I think that conversation would be important to have way ahead of time, as opposed to after the budget. I understand how the legislature works and the department heads are dealing with their budgets, but just maybe a work session early on in this process so that the manager and staff can see what the assembly is kind of thinking and the direction that we're kind of heading, because...
Okay. And maybe we can incorporate that with the budget policies that we're going to talk about at the next meeting. I'm going to present it anyway at the next meeting, and that will have a lot of different issues and topics that I'm sure the assembly will want to weigh in on.
That sounds great.
And even if we left it at this schedule, we could add something in between. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. So, and I know I'm gone generally from March 15th to April 1st, so I'll miss some of this discussion, but I have for the last 10 years.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, definitely we could do something earlier. One of the challenges we've heard from past assemblies was pushback that your group had a hard time giving feedback until you knew what the status of the budget was, meaning, is it balanced, is it not balanced? And so that's why it's kind of configured this way. Doesn't mean we can't change that, for sure. But that was a lot of the feedback I'd get, is if we put it out too early, meaning, or asked you for your opinions too early, you were like, well, how can I give you, Steve and Jody, an opinion when I don't even know if it's balanced yet? And that's the piece that we just have to work through. Jody and I aren't going to know if this is balanced until later in the process. So any meeting we have with the assembly prior to that is going to be pretty conceptual, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but there are some limitations.
Yep.
Okay, so we had a discussion on the schedule for the budget, and I just, for the public listening, this contract with our federal lobbyist is $3,000 a month, and the manager caught, it would have been 8 years since we've renewed this contract, and the amounts to remain the same, but there was some wording that needed to be changed. It still said the city of Petersburg, and now it's going to be the Petersburg Borough, so I think it's worth the money. So that's just my 2 cents. Is there any other discussion on that side of the topic? Clerk, call the roll on the consent agenda, please.
Okay. Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda passes unanimously with a 6-0 vote. Now it's time for a report of other officers. Solid waste baler status. We have a presentation from Public Works Director Cotta.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Cotta, the Public Works Director for Petersburg Borough, and I'm here to provide a status on the Borough's solid waste baler. Petersburg's baling facility was built in the mid-1990s and started operations in August of 1996. Since that time, the solid waste baler has been used to bale the community solid waste and, more recently, recyclables as well. The baler consists of several major components that all work together to compact solid waste and process it into bales, which are then loaded into 40-foot shipping containers for transport south. A brief overview of the process is as follows. First, you have a conveyor stage. Garbage is emptied from the collection trucks onto the baler floor. It is then pushed by a front-end loader onto a conveyor belt and transported up an incline. Once garbage reaches the top of the conveyor, it falls into a hopper. Next, we have the compaction stage. Once the hopper is full, the baler operator activates the main ram to push garbage from the hopper into an adjacent bale chamber where it is compacted into a rectangular shape. After that, we have the ejection stage. When compaction of the bale is complete, a side ram pushes it out onto a set of elevated rails. As the compacted bale exits the bale chamber, a wire tie unit wraps the bale with wire under tension to maintain the shape of the bale and allow it to be handled without coming apart. And then the final stage is once all the wire wrap is complete, the bale is weighed and then loaded into a shipping container via forklift. The solid waste baler is a complex machine with many moving parts. Major working components of the baler are the belt conveyor, control system, hydraulic system, wear surfaces on the rams, hopper and bale chamber, the main frame and structure, and the wire tie unit. Some of these components require periodic maintenance and or replacement, while others are expected to last a lifetime of the machine. Although the main frame of our baler appears to be in good condition, many of the other portions of the machine have failed or are failing. A breakdown of these items is as follows. Belt conveyor. The conveyor frame has been deteriorating for several years now and is approaching the point of structural failure. It is too corroded to economically rebuild and was budgeted for replacement in FY16 at a cost of $100,000. Proposals for conveyor replacement came in well over what was budgeted, in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000, so the project was deferred. The conveyor belt was last replaced in 2010 and is due for replacement again. A belt failure is what initiated the extended downtime we experienced this past spring. A new belt costs about $45,000 and would have been part of a complete conveyor replacement. However, just replacing the belt at this time would not solve the larger structural issues previously described. The control system is another major component. The main processor for the control system failed earlier this year and caused the baler to be down for several weeks while repairs were made. A backup controller also failed to resolve the problem. Neither hardware nor software support is available for the long obsolete control system. However, with the assistance of Mattingly Electric, we were able to get some functionality back, but not all. A full update of the control system is needed and is beyond the scope of what local electricians are able to provide. The last estimate we got for a full control system replacement was approximately $150,000. The hydraulic system, this portion of the baler has not given us any major trouble lately and appears to be in good shape, even though over 20 years old. Then you have the wear surfaces on the rams, hopper, and bale chamber. These linings are AR400 abrasion-resistant steel and require periodic replacement. This was last done in 2009 at a total cost of approximately $100,000. The wear surfaces replaced in 2009 have begun to fail and are in need of replacement again. Estimated cost at this time would be approximately $120,000. The main frame and structure of the machine appears to be in good condition, with some spot repairs needed, but nothing major. Last major component I'm going to talk about is the wire tie unit. And this is what we've been having trouble with lately. The original wire tie machine was known to be in poor condition due to age and heavy use. It was our intention to attempt a rebuild of the wire tie machine this year, and we had budgeted $10,000 for this. However, extreme wear on all major working portions of the machine was causing it to become highly unpredictable and unsafe to operate. A combination of repeated breakdowns, unreliable and hazardous operation, and a higher than expected cost to rehab caused us to leave it turned off the last time it broke down. We have a new wire tie unit ordered and is expected to arrive mid-November. Cost of the new wire tie unit was a little less than $29,000 and is being funded out of the Sanitation Department's FY19 machinery and equipment budget. This unit should continue to serve for many years whether the boiler is partially or fully replaced. There are three major options for the solid waste boiler going forward. One would be reactive maintenance, in other words, replacing components as they fail and cause outages. A second option is partial replacement, which would consist of replacing the conveyor and control system entirely, and then a reline of all the wear surfaces. And the third option would be full replacement of the entire machine, minus the wire tie unit, which is being replaced now, as I just described. So, option one, reactive maintenance is not advisable for multiple reasons, the biggest of which is worker and customer safety. If, for instance, the conveyor structure should fail, it could cause a structural collapse on anything or anyone that is on or near the horizontal portion of the belt, which is over the pit, could potentially fall in. Another reason is the unpredictable nature of these types of failures. Not only will they cause extended, unplanned downtime, but they will result in hefty, unbudgeted expenditures as well. Option two, which is a partial replacement of failed or failing components. Doing some quick math, this would involve the following costs. The belt conveyor at $150,000, control system $150,000, reline of the wear surfaces $120,000. So the cost for a partial replacement total project would be $420,000 estimated. Option three, which would be full replacement of the solid waste boiler, breaks down as follows. Boiler with controls at $400,000, belt conveyor at $150,000. So your total project cost is estimated at $550,000. Both partial and full replacement represent major capital expenditures, and either option will stretch the financial resources of the Sanitation Department to the maximum. Although the partial replacement option is less costly overall, there are major portions of the machine that would not be replaced, like the hydraulic system and the mainframe. Spending $420,000 to partially replace a 22-year-old machine is less cost-effective in the long run than investing $550,000 in a new solid waste boiler, which should have a service life of 20 years or more. For the above reasons, Public Works recommends moving forward with the full replacement option. The first steps will be to fully assess the Sanitation Department's finances and project funding options, start a supplemental budget process, and then develop project specifications and bid documents geared toward replacement of the boiler in the spring of 2019. Rates will also need to be examined as part of this process to see if future rate increases are needed to help build up reserves that would be mostly or fully depleted by funding a boiler purchase. Public Works is requesting the Assembly's approval to proceed with development of a full replacement project as previously described. It is important to note that no funds will be expended on the project without the additional Assembly approvals needed to complete the supplemental budget process. This means that should the Assembly vote now in favor of proceeding forward with the project, that there will still be additional opportunities for public discussion prior to any future project expenditures. And that was a lot of information. Hopefully everyone understands what's going on, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Member Lim?
I have a couple questions for you, please. Have you looked at the new systems on the market at all? In other words, are they more efficient, less efficient? Do you have a feel for it?
Well, efficiency isn't really a big problem that we have with the equipment. It's longevity, if that's what you're talking about.
And I guess I'm using the wrong words. Lifespan is what I was more interested. I guess what I was really interested in.
Yeah, the newer stuff has better design features with more longevity built in, and you can spec things out with on the belt conveyor, for instance. Right now we use a chain drive. People are moving away from that to like a roller system that's much more durable and easier to maintain, and therefore should last longer than the old chain drive system. The controls in particular have been updated on the new stuff to be much more user-friendly, require less adjustment, and so yeah, there are things like that we're definitely looking at. That's the newer technology. We don't want to just replace in kind. We would want to build some additional durability and reliability into the machine, hopefully get more time out of it than we've gotten out of this one. But 22 years is a pretty good run for a piece of equipment that's used on a daily basis.
My second question, when I went back and looked at our funds available, are we going to have to come back to them later and look at a rate adjustment or increased rates at some point?
We're going to have to take a look at rates for sure. Whether they'll need to go up, I'm not ready to say that at this time, but we'll have to take a hard look at them because, this expenditure would represent most, if not all, of what the sanitation department has in reserves. And so in order to get back to where, the goal is for that department, which I believe is 4 to 6 months, if we're fully depleted, we need to look at how we can build those reserves back to be within the guideline level. And rates will be a big part of that process. So.
Thank you.
Member Walder and then Member Mutual.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions for you, more along the lines of daily operations. So what's the lead time on getting the new one up here?
I don't know that offhand. I would guess 4 to 6 months.
Okay. Then what is and then how much time would it be to take it in and put it in and take one out? Take one out and put one in, I guess, is the right way to go?
Probably at least a couple of weeks. Yeah. Because you have to demo out all the old stuff and then, prep the site and install the new stuff. So 2 weeks minimum, maybe a month on the outside.
Then what do we do in the meantime with baling our garbage at that point?
Well, we do what we've been doing recently with the breakdowns, which is, we send out solid waste in open tops and then we stockpile recyclables until we have the ability to bale again. And we have a pretty good system set up for that at this point. We've got a loading bulkhead there that works really well for loading solid waste, and we do have some floor space where we can stockpile recyclables. So that would be the plan for the replacement period.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mutual, you have a...
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're talking the spring of 2019, that if everything went the way you wanted it to, we would have a new baler.
Yeah, spring or summer. These kind of things, take time. You have to go through the supplemental budget process. Then, presuming that's successful, then bid specifications go out to bid, and then there's the lead time on the equipment. So, spring 2019 would probably be the most optimistic schedule, but that's what we would aim for. We would try for that.
Between now and then, I was up there yesterday dropping some stuff off in that big bay, and so when it's dumped in that big bay, and your guys pick it up with a front loader and put it in that container.
Yes.
And that's why everything is shipped out.
Right.
now.
And the trucks, we empty directly into the open top because we have that, it's big enough area for them to maneuver up there. But things, the garbage that people are dropping off on the floor, yeah, that's scooped up and put in the open top.
Mr. Mayor, the other question I had is that, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this right now. I'm leaning I'm not going to vote for it. It would really help me understand if you had long-term, goals and objectives for the solid waste department. If we're going to spend $500,000 at least on a baler, I think we should be looking 5 or 10 years down the line to see, this baler that we're looking at or you're looking at right now. It might be the latest and greatest, but I want to make sure it meets the needs of the community over. I'm just going to go 5 years. Who knows? But I don't want to replace it with something that we have. If there's something out there that's either more efficient or more cost-effective to run, and maybe some of the needs of this community aren't being met with that baler, are we looking into any of that stuff, or are we just going to go out and purchase the latest baler?
Well, there would be a process of, first of all, developing bid specs, and then you ask those questions during the development of a specifications package for a project. What are the long-term anticipated needs? What are the daily needs? What are the, what does this thing need to do? So we don't just make the assumption that the machine that's in place, we want to replace it apples to apples in kind. We would be looking at, what are the needs a few years out? I mean, those are questions you ask during the development phase of a project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Member Stan Greger. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it would have been March of 2014 because I had just been appointed to the Assembly, and then Public Works Director Hagerman took me on a tour of Public Works facilities, including the baler. And that was a discussion then. I was asking some question or other, and Director Hagerman was like, and we're kind of cobbling this thing together. It's hanging in, and we might get a couple of years. Could go tomorrow. Don't think so, but in short, it's mainly for the listening public. This is something that's been on the docket for a while, at least as a potential replacement. Even when with the wire tie thing came up that you were referring to, and then one member or another of the Assembly asking you, so how long is this going to get us before we have to have a conversation on baler replacement? And your answer was very candid, was, I don't know. It depends on how this thing operates. And it's done, is really what it boils down to. Time has come. The other members answered my questions on that. I think mainly I just wanted to illustrate that to the public. This has been something, it's not a new catastrophic failure. We've been hoping it wouldn't, but hoping for the best. Anyway, that's all I had. No questions for Chris.
Okay. Any other comments by any other Assembly members? Member Lynn?
Yeah, it seems to me that if we proceed with it, it doesn't negate what I think Assembly Member Jeff there wants to do. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can look at the longer term. No matter what, you're still going to have compact it to get it. If my understanding from Chris is correct, you still got to bail it to get it out of here. No matter what we do, they may mean a smaller one, but nevertheless, I don't think the two objectives are mutually exclusive, since it's going to take some time to go through this.
Yeah, and you touched on a good point that we probably need to say out loud here, and that's, I've had the question asked of me a couple of times, well, why can't we just, eliminate the baler and go with open tops and just load waste into open tops? Because there's other communities that do that in Southeast. The big reason is that the trend in the waste shipping industry is moving towards requiring baling of the waste before it ships south, and that's what's going to be happening in a couple of years from now, or maybe less. Is there's going to be a requirement that waste be baled. So just continuing as we're doing now, loading into open tops isn't really a good thing to do, because then we'll end up having to make this expenditure eventually, and maybe with less planning than we have now. Somebody publishes a new regulation and catches you off guard. Now we have some warning. Baling is the definitely the best way to go that we've been able to determine so far. So.
Member Walter, do you have another comment?
I just have one more comment real quick, and I'll make this quick. I would imagine with open tops, you're going to have a lot of complaints down south with odors and fumes and stuff. We just talked about that with local markets, farms in town, it has to be no fumes and stuff. So, yeah, I think you're right. They're probably headed towards closed containers and controlled, atmospheric odors. So,
yeah,
so it's probably something that we're just going to have to look at doing.
Yeah, the other communities in Southeast that aren't baling right now are actually looking into getting balers. Wrangell is a prime example. They haven't been baling, but that's going to be something they're probably going to end up doing really soon.
Well, I've got a few, I don't know if they're comments or concerns. It's just, I went up and had a tour from the facility from Mr. Cotta last week or a couple weeks ago, and I've known that it's been an issue since 2009 when we rebuilt it. And then, like Member Stanton Greger says, in 2014, on a tour he took, he was mentioned to him that it was kind of iffy at that time. So my concern would be why we didn't approach replacing it when we had more time to give it more thought. And now it sounds like we're between a rock and a hard spot. And in this, if we agree for you to move forward, are you then going to come back to us with a demolition cost? And do we even know what the condition of the structure is underneath the floor where the start of the conveyor is? Is there any, I've kind of already answered this question. There could be some hidden added expenses, so it might not just be $550,000. I guess we have to move forward. We have to proceed, but I'd like to know a more hard figure on what the overall cost to demo and replace with whatever new type baler we just decide to get would be. And on our tour, if I remember right, you mentioned the building has a couple other issues like the fire alarm and the sprinkler system. I would like to know what the cost would be for that part of it too, because it's all part of the facility. In my mind, it needs to be rehabbed. So, I don't know if I guess I would be in favor of voting to move this forward. Since we're not guaranteeing that we're going to spend any money, we have to figure out where we're going to go from here. And another concern I had as you were talking, 5 to 6 months. If it was 7 months, that would put us into June. When does our garbage collection start ramping up? It must be around summertime when the canneries start operating. And what is our ability going to be to handle larger volumes of garbage with the system that we're using now? So there's a lot of questions, but I'd like those answered, and don't have to answer them today, but some kind of a report would be good.
Sure, yeah.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
On the question of cost, it's just like any other project. We actually don't know the cost until we get bids back in.
I understand that.
Yeah, and that's the tough part. We can get estimates, and Chris will do a good job of that. But reality is, we'll go through a bid process, and we'll bring it back to the assembly, and we may or may not be in the money. We may be in a situation that's, oops, and we have to back up and do pieces of it. There's no guarantee, and that's the sad part, but it's reality.
Yeah, and things like demolition, for instance, we would like to include that as part of the project cost for a contractor to come in and do that. But, certain things like that, if it turns out to be cost prohibitive or if it adds too much to the project, things like that we could potentially do in-house also, if needed.
Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would really like to see an examination of what it's going to cost. You've told us that a new baler would cost about $500,000, but I'd like to also know what it's going to take to get that building up to standards to put a new baler in there. I could see this thing creeping up to $1 million by the time you're talking about foundation work, structural work, demolishing the old one. Well, we might be able to afford $550,000 for a new baler and the belt. I wouldn't want it to get creeping up to $1 million because, I mean, if we're going to spend $1 million on it, let's talk about it up front. Let's not piecemeal in the building and structural stuff that needs to go in it. It would help me breathe a little easier knowing that we looked at everything, not just the baler component of this.
Yeah, the building foundation, the building shell are in good condition.
Are not?
Are in good condition, yes. The roof probably needs an inspection. I don't think anybody's been up there in a while, but we don't have any leaks or anything. The fire sprinkler system, as the mayor noted, has some issues. We've been doing repairs to that here and there. The fire alarm system is in need of replacement. It's, kind of like the boiler control system. It's obsolete and no longer supported, and a lot of it's not functional anymore. And I do actually have a cost for that. I don't have it with me today, but that's a number I have gotten recently. As far as the cost, you're concerned about costs spiraling upwards, and that's that's something you have to keep an eye on in any project. And we don't have major concerns about the building structure. There are some issues we would be looking at possibly addressing with the pit that the conveyor sits in. There's been some groundwater coming in there for years, and it's not really a major problem. It's something we'd like to, while we're down in there, maybe do some patching or something. But as far as the project, spiraling out of control to $1 million or whatever, I mean, we don't have that much money. So we would have to be looking at other options if we got a project of that size. We'd have to look at borrowing or something, which of course isn't, that's not something we have the control over. But, yeah.
Okay, I guess this was just a presentation, but in the document, or in the presentation, it does ask for assembly approval to proceed.
It's on the agenda.
Oh, okay. All right, this is okay.
Action item in a bit.
Okay. Long agenda. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cotta. If there's no other questions for Mr. Cotta, we'll...
No, if I've got more, I'll ask him during that part.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody need to take a break? Brandy, are you doing okay on the other end there?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
We'll take 5 after the manager's report. How's that sound?
Sure, that sounds like a plan. Cool. Okay, we're on to the mayor's report, which is pretty short today. Southeast Alaska Power Agency Board of Directors, the Petersburg Borough is seeking letters of interest from the qualified borough residents to serve our community by taking a seat on the SEPA Board of Directors. The Assembly will need to appoint 1 voting member and 1 alternate to the SEPA Board for calendar year 2019. Generally, we do that in early December, so we could accept letters till the first meeting of December?
Correct.
Not sure of the date, 5th, 6th, whatever it is.
The 3rd.
And you could mail your letters of interest, maybe submitted to Borough Clerk via mail to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or via email to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, or by delivering to the clerk's office at 12 South Nordic Drive. There's a flu emergency preparedness exercise called POD Friday, November 9th from 2:30 to 5:30 at the community gym. Volunteers are needed to help with the event. For more information or to sign up as a volunteer, please call the Public Health Center at 772-4611. And as the representative from the Chamber of Commerce mentioned, there's a meeting here tomorrow evening from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, kind of an open house discussion on the tourism industry in Petersburg. And that concludes the mayor's report. Do you want to take a break now? Okay. Okay, manager, would you please give your report?
Yes, sir. The new Hoyer lift arrived at the Manor last week. This is a mechanical device designed to lift patients safely. The staff up there is very happy and thankful for getting it. Harbor staff continues to work with the Corps of Engineers on the South Harbor Dredging Feasibility Study. Public is invited to provide comments on the draft study that can be found on the Borough's website or hard copies at both Borough Finance Office and the Harbor Office until November 5th, 2018. So, hurry. Thank you to Public Works, who built a snow gate in-house and installed it at the corner of the Middle Harbor parking lot to help snow removal efforts in the winter. Also, thanks to the crew for knocking down the brush and cleaning the outside perimeters of both ends of the South Harbor and Middle Harbor parking lots. It's a huge help to keep the runoff from backing up in these areas. Annually, the Harbor works with several local companies to share the cost of a licensed crane inspector to come through town and look at the cranes, including both of the harbor cranes. The inspector's report includes regular maintenance items that require professional attention. We have actually scheduled this large crane to be serviced mid-November through early January to reduce the impact on the fleet's needs. The small crane will be operating during the same time. Harbor moorage is up, but transient traffic this year was lower than in other years, which is a heads up. A big attaboy to our Harbor Night Security Officer, Carl McDonald, for noticing a strong smell coming from one of the water pedestals in the South Harbor during rounds at 5:30 a.m. Soon after, the pedestal had flames coming out of it, called the PD and got Power and Light to shut down the heat trace, and Carl stood by on the fire watch, making sure it was just an isolated incident. Thanks to Kevin Hess for his quick response, shutting down the power to the system. The herring are in. The Defiant has been making weekly deliveries, and a few of the local holiday herring picklers have been seen grabbing a bucket or two for the season's annual delicacy. Special thanks to Justin Peter and his crew for bringing in the fish and allowing community members to gather and continue much-loved community tradition. See everybody on December 12th at the annual Pickled Herring Contest. Water Department staff is performing biannual cleaning and maintenance of the sedimentation basins and other treatment equipment at the plant, while also working to complete the winterizing of the Cabin Creek raw water line. I'll say that a few times. Water Department is installing a small 7.5 kW standby propane generator at the water storage tank to supply power to the site during outages. The genset and propane tank is installed and requires final wiring before it is ready for service. Wastewater staff has set up a temporary pump station at the boiler while they are reworking the permanent pump station. They anticipate that the work will be complete in the next couple of months. The composting of sludge from the treatment plant has been going well. Staff routinely meets the EPA time and temperature requirements for pathogen destruction. The department invites any resident to drop off tree limbs on 14th Street near the treatment plant for free so we can use the chips in the process. Staff is working on construction of a small shed to protect and store the wood chips for the composting process. We continue to experience problems in our pump stations because of flushable wipes. The public is encouraged to please place any wipes in the trash instead of flushing these materials. They accumulate in pump stations and cause blockage issues in the pumps. The only way to remove the blockages is by manually removing the pumps and pulling them out by gloved hand. Public is encouraged to only flush toilet paper down the sewers. Blind Slough Hydro Evaluation Project is ongoing. We did receive the initial draft of the conditions assessment and have provided comments back to the consultant. We expect to receive the final draft of the report in early November, at which time we will present it to myself and the Assembly. So, Carl's that next meeting? I can't remember what they said on the Macmillan. Yeah. I think we're getting really close to having that in front of the Assembly. The FERC Part 12 dam inspection and safety evaluation, which is required every 5 years, as well as the dam safety and surveillance monitoring plan, are almost complete. D&D Tree Service was hired to replace screws on the roof of the Power and Light headquarters building. It was found that many of the screws had backed out over time, so we're replacing them with larger screws and tightening things up. After this work, the roof should last for many more years. The roof was not included in the recent building remodel due to its generally good condition. The line crew was able to take advantage of Wrangell's 85-foot bucket truck in September to address several problem trees around town. Power Light thanks all of the property owners that worked with us on the removal of these trees for the sake of a more reliable distribution system for the community. Big thanks to the City and Borough of Wrangell for use of the truck. Line crew also helped repair some playground lighting for the school district, and a really big thank you for all of that work prior to the Halloween holiday. Annual pole top rescue training and other topics will be part of the departmental safety meeting scheduled for November 9th. Wrangell Light and Power linemen are coming over for the training as well. Recent rains have resulted in a lot of calls for service due to clogged culverts and storm drains. Please let us know if that's happening, and we'll do what we can. Drainage improvements were made to the municipal building parking lot to reduce the amount of water ponding on the surface. A section of the poorly graded asphalt was removed and replaced with concrete, and a new concrete valley gutter installed. So looks like that's going to work real well. It turned into an ice skating rink prior, so we're looking forward to not having that to deal with. Congratulations to Officer Wolf, who completed his field training process, and Blake Morrison, who has started with the police department as a dispatch corrections officer. Officer Tate completed Krav Maga law enforcement instructor certification at the Kodiak Police Department and is looking forward to instructing the department on these new techniques. Officer Wachter is working with the Petersburg Medical Center and EMS on the active shooter exercise at the Petersburg Medical Center. The first annual Petersburg Haunted House was held at the Petersburg Police Department. It was from October 31st, from 4 to 6, and then 7 to 10 on November 1st. Police Department handed out glow necklaces and candy on Halloween and encouraged the community to stop by, and it looked like everybody had a pretty good time.
Great time.
I'm continuing to work with the department heads, the school, and the hospital on finalizing the capital project list to be reviewed and approved by the Assembly, hoping the list will be available for the Assembly for the first meeting in December.
Any questions for the manager on this report? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe for the manager or the police chief, what is Crave MAGA law enforcement instruction?
It was, I believe it's Krav Maga, and it's defensive tactics. So we never had a defensive tactics instructor, and since I was here, I believe the only defensive tactics these guys received was at the police academy, and then whatever they did on their own. So by sending one of the officers to the instructor course, he'll be able to teach everyone at the police department on a continual basis and stay up to date with all the techniques.
Thank you. And the other question I had was, can somebody explain to me why there would be flames coming out of a water pedestal? That just seems kind of weird. What's the mechanism there to get flames coming out of a water pedestal?
I wondered if anybody would ask that. Yeah. The harbors are, all our water systems are pretty high-end, very expensive, so we have a heat trace system, electric heat trace system that goes to all the pedestals and keeps them warm in the winter months, especially when they're apt to freeze and do a lot of damage. We've had issues where they fail and end up blowing off the top of a water pedestal, and I've been called when I've been in Hawaii that we've had a geyser going 40 feet up in the air because it's 100 pounds of pressure that are servicing those. So that's where the electrical came in.
Any other questions of the manager? I have one, Steve. Have we had a chance to look at the condition of the municipal building sewer connection? Or is it...
I'm not sure if have we run the camera yet? Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor, the municipal building sewer issue is still ongoing. We've got on a regular schedule to clean to get ahead of the problem so that we don't have any backups. We haven't had a chance to run the camera yet. It's actually in a different spot, a different configuration underground than we thought. It's not as easy to get to inspect. So that's proving a little difficult, but we are staying ahead of the problem now with some maintenance. So.
Okay, just kind of curious. I saw someone on the sidewalk the other day. Looked like they might have been cleaning a line or something. So
we're trying to do regular maintenance to avoid the unexpected. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Sir, Brandy? Okay, we're pretty tough cookie hanging in there. All right, we'll reconvene the meeting. It's 1:30. Next thing on the agenda is item 14, unfinished business. First item there is item A, the only item under unfinished business is ordinance 2018-18. An ordinance amending the Petersburg Municipal Code by repealing Titles 18, subdivision, and 19, zoning, and adopting the new Borough Development Code. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its second reading.
So moved.
Second. Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Greger. This is the ordinance that we had the public hearing on earlier today, so is there any discussion? Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I'm often reminded, just because I've been following this issue closely doesn't mean everyone else has. So the question of Liz, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Sure. Liz, if you could just briefly walk us through why we want to adopt this new Borough Development Code. What's the why behind it?
Why? If I may?
Or the goal, however you want to go with that.
Sure. So when we started this process, it really is based back in the comprehensive plan that got adopted in 2016. And through that public process, we had people identify different issues. Those issues are coalesced into action items and ideas, and some of the recommendations were to address the shortcomings in our code. And so building off of that, we had goals to improve and streamline our approval processes. The way our current code is written, there's a lot of extra meetings in the process that really don't need to be there. And so as we change the code, we're eliminating some of those extra meetings and trying to have a faster, smoother process for the public to go through. There's also a lot of inconsistencies in our code. You read different sections and they actually conflict. And so it's very difficult for us to apply and enforce those things when you have conflicting portions of your code. A lot of the zoning districts are outdated and off the mark on the boundaries. We have pretty weak standards in certain areas, especially areas that we really should value for our economy, like downtown and our historic or really high-use visitor areas like the Hammer Slough. We don't really have very good standards in place to protect the value of those areas. Also, we have a lot of places where we have incompatible uses against each other. We have industrial and residential, and that creates these conflicts that we really have no way of resolving through our existing code. So in general, it's taking a code that's been in place since the mid-'80s and trying to bring it up to current standards and include in some things that people identified through the comp plan process and improved processes.
Thank you. And just follow up on that is something I've heard through the community on this is those people who have read it all the way through, it's exhaustive. And I think because the goal is to kind of streamline some of these things. A piece of feedback I've gotten, though, is what about a law of unintended consequences? Let's say some part of this ends up not working for our community. And I think I need to remind myself of, and I think is important for the public also, is that could happen, and if so, we can change it. This is really, in essence, a living document where if we find one piece of this doesn't fit for our community, 3 readings and with a public hearing, and it can be fixed. In short, there's nothing final about this in case we realize a piece of it doesn't work. I'm speaking correctly there, aren't I, Liz?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll definitely be voting for this today, and I look forward to going over amendments at the appropriate time.
Any other discussion on this ordinance? Liz, can you refresh us on the schedule? I looked for it, I couldn't find it. I had a sheet, just so people listening know what the remainder of the process is going to be.
Right, so you have one more public hearing scheduled. It's public comment, public hearing on November 19th, and that's the one where I won't be here, but you'll be here. And then on December 3rd, we can always accept public comments, but there's no formal public hearing. And then December 17th would be the consideration of amendments and third reading.
Okay, so just I wanted that to be clarified for people listening, that there is still 3 more options to be publicly involved in this document. Liz, are those comments today from Farragut Farms and Ms. Copes, I believe we got the name right, are they going to be listed under proposed changes?
Yes.
Okay, if I thought so. Just, I didn't know if they had to email them to make it official or not, so. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, we might have already talked about this, but when it gets time to vote on these amendments, will we have any input from planning and zoning or city staff about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I included in your packet a list of what we have to date, and you'll notice on the front page it has a staff recommendation column. And in some cases, it does have a staff recommendation listed there. And where there isn't one listed, it's because it's more of a policy call and we don't necessarily have a recommendation on it. As far as the Planning Commission, I think they can look at the amendments. I don't know if we'll have an opportunity to do here are their specific, as a collective commission. Some of the things that you're looking at, they've already considered, and I've noted where those overlap,
Great. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, was that unanimous or was Brandy's vote? Yes. Okay, that brings us to new business. First item under new business is ordinance 2018-19. An ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, section 4.28.020, sales tax definitions, to clarify that marine passenger ship cruise ticket contracts that are subject to Petersburg Borough's marine passenger fee are not subject to Petersburg Borough's sales tax. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Greger. Discussion. Member Walter.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Tomorrow we're going to have a community discussion on the future of our cruise ship, what we're going to accept in this community. I would like to table this until we can have a chance to discuss this in the public before we make a decision on this. So that's my 2 cents worth.
And that requires a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, according to our new summary sheet that I'm looking here that the clerk gave us, it's a motion to lay on the table. This requires a second, but it's not debatable, it's not amendable. So that just brings us to a vote.
No discussion, just a vote?
That's what this says.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and this is not tabled to a time certain, so we'll just bring it up later.
Should we assign a time to bring this up, though? Kurt, would you like to put a time on it?
Well, I'd like the public to weigh in on this tomorrow night, throw it out there, and then we could put it on the agenda for next week. Or our next meeting, excuse me.
Clerk Thompson, does that work for you?
Sure.
Or in terms of lay it on the table to a time certain?
That's what I would prefer, yes, to a time certain rather than just tabling it.
Right.
Yes.
So do you want to change your motion, Member Woolley, to lay it on the table to a time certain, November 19th?
Yes, what he said.
That's our next meeting, I guess.
Yes.
So that's why I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
So that's what we'll be voting on then, without knowing all the 100% of the proper rules. Clerk, call the roll.
Okay. Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
No.
Jeff?
No.
So, what was the count? Was it a 4-2?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it passed with the 4-2 vote to table it until time certain, November 19th. Okay, now that brings us to appointments. we should do these separately. Assembly appointments for representatives to different things, but first of all, we'll appoint a vice mayor, which is, we have to do that by code, by charter, or code, whatever it is, at this meeting, first meeting in November. And without any objection from the assembly, I would like to appoint member Stanton Greger to vice mayor again. And if someone wants to make a motion to appoint someone else, that's their, they can. But with no objection, I'd like to appoint member Stanton Greger to vice mayor. I don't see any hands coming up, so I guess that's member Stanton Greger will be the vice mayor for the next year. And then we have some changes we need to make with these appointments, assembly appointments. I'd like to entertain a motion. If we need a motion, do we have to vote on every one of these specifically if there's objection?
Correct.
Is that what the attorney told us last year? I'd like to appoint myself to the Southeast Conference representative and the Alaska Municipal League representative, liaison to the Harbor Board, Kurt Walhuter, to stay there. We need to get input or a willing assembly member to be the liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board, since member Strand isn't on the assembly anymore. And member Mucci is the elected official to the Local Emergency Planning Committee currently. And of course, member Stanton Greger expressed his will to not be the liaison to the hospital board anymore, conflicting with his work schedule, not because he didn't enjoy it.
Correct.
He didn't like it, so. Repeat what you said, correct?
Very accurately, thank you.
Okay, so that's what I would like to propose, unless there's some amendments. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to be considered as the Southeast Conference representative.
Okay, make a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Stanton Greger, to have member Mucci be the representative of the Southeast Conference. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
No.
Mark?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
No. Okay, that motion fails with a 3-3 vote. So,
3-3?
there was a...
Sorry, I apologize.
There was a 3-3 vote, correct?
Okay, yes.
So, without any objection, I'd like to appoint myself to the Southeast Conference representative position and Alaska Municipal League representative, and Kurt Walhuter to the liaison to the Harbor Board, and then we need Jeff Mucci to the elected official to the Local Emergency Planning Committee. Is there any interest in the other two positions? Member Lynn, would you be interested in any of those?
I was on the hospital board before, and I would consider it again for...
Okay, so if we could put member Lynn's name on the liaison to the hospital board. Is there anybody interested in being a liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board?
I'll throw my name out there for that.
Are you willing to do that, Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, without any objection to those appointments,
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Could I just get a voice vote of our Southeast Conference representative? If that's the motion, somebody is going to make the motion for our representative. So somebody should.
Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
We did a voice vote, right?
Just for me.
Right.
And
so for voice vote for me, okay.
Yep.
Voice vote for these appointments that I proposed. Or we want to do one. Let's do the Southeast Conference one, and then we'll do the remainders.
Yes.
Okay. Does that make sense, Clerk Thompson? Okay.
Call the roll.
Yes, call the roll, please.
Okay, Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Bob?
And we're voting on me being the representative to Southeast Conference is what we're doing this time.
Yes.
Jay?
Nope.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy.
Yes.
So it's 4-2.
Okay, now we will, if there's no objections, we will, I'd like to appoint myself to Alaska Municipal League representative position, Kurt Walhooter to the liaison to the Harbor Board, Bob Lynn to the liaison to the Hospital Board, Member Moreau to the liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board, and Member Mucci to the elected officials to the Local Emergency Planning Committee. Is there any objections to those appointments? Seeing none, that is how we will proceed. Okay, what, then we need to, I guess that's it for that. Discussion, that brings us to item C under new business, solid waste baler replacement. Public Works Director Cotter requests Assembly approval to proceed with the development of a full replacement of the solid waste baler. A copy of Director Cotter's memorandum outlining the baler failing systems and providing maintenance/replacement options can be found under agenda item 11A. That's what we discussed earlier. I'd entertain a motion to authorize Public Works Director Cotter to proceed with the development plan.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Stanton Greger. Any other discussion? Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll definitely be voting yes at this point. I mean, you, Mr. Mayor, I think raised some pretty important concerns in terms of potential cost down the line. But as we discussed earlier, we can't know until we get into this. And since there's no funds expended on the project without future Assembly approval, I'll definitely be voting yes to get Chris working on this process. That is all.
Okay, any other discussion on this topic?
I have a question for Member Minucci. You've brought up a concern about looking at a broader perspective here of looking at what we might do with our solid waste. Would it be, and I'm throwing this out, would it be applicable at this point to amend that motion, and I'm moving that to you, but we'd also look at developing a more solid waste plan of what we might want to do for the future?
Mr. Mayor. Yep. Thanks, Bob. Later on in the agenda, I have on there possibility of a work session to kind of go over our solid waste issues and our recycling issue and composting issues. If we could do that sometime in November, December, we could probably dovetail that in with what Chris has got working, or part of his plan, so that when we do get ready to pull the trigger on whatever we're going to do up at the baler facility, we'll have the opportunity to at least have some more information. The Assembly will have more information, as well as public input from the community about what they'd like to see, different ideas. So that I think we can do both of them at the same time, and I don't think this motion is going to prevent us from going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It could be something, it could be just a document as we work on as we move forward, make adjustments to it. So, clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, that passes with a 6-0 vote. Alaska Municipal League Public Lands Committee. This is something new that Nils Andreasen sent us an email. It sounds like, if I read it right, if I understood it right, they want to get a committee together, or kind of a representation from people from different communities to be on a board that discusses land issues around the state. Am I understanding that right, Debbie?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd entertain, I guess we need he's asking for an appointment, right, for this? Member Lynn.
I've been a member of the policy committee for AML, and that requires quite a few telephone calls along the line during the year, just to look at different policies, particularly when the legislature's in session, where AML wants to go, and then that goes to the board. And if it would be advantageous for us, I could also assume this role as part of that policy committee.
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So does it have, I don't know, I'm asking city staff, does it have to be an elected official, or can it be a member of the borough staff? I don't know.
I don't see in here where it specifies.
Right.
If I may, actually, at one time, we joined NACO, the National Association of Counties, and I put my name in as the borough manager to be on the NACO Public Lands Committee, and they put me on it. I went to 2 meetings and quickly figured out that NACO really, really wanted elected officials at that level. So, felt a little bit out of place in the sense that I was an appointed official and everybody else in the room on that committee is elected county commissioners throughout the United States. So at the NACO level, it's clear they want elected officials. At the AML level, I don't think that's specified, as you've said. So that's the only background I can give you, is that going to the NACO meetings in D.C., it was and attending some of their conference calls, they really wanted elected officials.
Does that answer your question, Member Mucci?
Yes. No.
Any other discussion? I'm all right with Member Lynn being a representative from Petersburg Lands Committee. I believe, are you still on the policy?
I'm still on the policy committee, yes.
Do we have to make a motion for that, Mayor, just to...
Let's make a motion.
Then I'll make a motion that we leave Bob on this committee.
Seconded by Member Stan Greger. Motion made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Stan Greger to appoint Member Lynn to the Lands Committee for Alaska Municipal League. We kind of already discussed it, but all those in favor say aye. Aye. So that was a unanimous aye. That brings us to Petersburg Navigation Improvements Feasibility Study in-kind contribution amendment. I'd entertain a motion to approve this amendment.
Second.
A motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Walhooter to approve this Navigation Improvements Feasibility Study in-kind amendment. I'll ask the Harbor Master to maybe give us a little explanation on this. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's our match to the dredging, right, Will?
Exactly. Yeah, we originally agreed to $325, $275 of that being cash contributions, of which we've given them $270,000, and they're working that off. And $50,000 in-kind contributions, just as a rough estimate to what we can do for cheaper than what the federal government can do. So we've had a couple of surveys done. We hired the RB, went out to bid, and got Erica Ann to do 4 surveys here in the upcoming year. And that's gone over that $50,000 amount. And so we're trying to free up a little bit more just to make it easier. The money stays with us. We only use it if we spend it, for this project. The federal government on the other side has freed up another additional monies for this. So it's, again, for every dollar they spend, we spend. They bumped up their number initially, $100,000 just to begin the project. So they've actually spent quite a bit more money than we have on this. So anyway, it's our money. It's staying here unless we have agreed to spend it.
So, and by finishing this feasibility study, this could potentially allow us to not have to meet Washington standards with our dredge spoils?
Actually, no, that is a different argument, but we have already passed that part of the phase. We've found that the dredge spoils are able to be put in water. So now they're looking for a location. And so right now, the Erica Ann is going on 4 surveys throughout the year, different times of the year, to really categorize what is on the bottom during 4 different times of the year, just so that they can better figure out where to put these spoils.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Any other discussion or questions? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, the action passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda under new business is item 15F. This is the letter that we discussed earlier in the meeting. drafted by Member Lynn. I'd entertain a motion to approve sending this letter to the people that are on the letter, the Chief Forest Service. There's a motion?
So moved. I'll second that, just for the sake of discussion.
Motion's been made by Member Stanton Greger, seconded by Member Walhooter. Discussion. Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Somewhat touching on some of the feedback that was written by Mr. Lee and by voice by several members of the community today. Not a whole lot of argument for me in terms of, I don't think the letter does enough. I personally thought the letter that Clerk Thompson helped me construct in early 2018 was polite and direct and definitely trying to inquire. And I voted for that. Same thing with I thought the resolution was fine that we talked about a couple weeks ago. I think being clear and direct is a good thing. But the rub is neither of those things passed, and none of them were close. And if my main goal is working towards accountability for the borough's timber, and that is, the borough's, timber, we got to start somewhere. And although I think the letter may be lacking in some ways, it's a good jumping off point. And I hate to use words better than nothing, but it's a place to start from. And if we aren't satisfied with the results from this, we can potentially revisit some of the other avenues. So I'll be voting for this today.
Any other discussion on the approval of this letter? Member Walhooter?
Yeah, this is directed at Member Lynn. Bob, I mean no disrespect by any means, You've got a lot of insight in this, what's going on here. So do you think, maybe I should ask you, what was your intent, when you wrote this letter? Do you think this would be strong enough, with the people that you have contact with, or do you think this should be stronger with some of the words that have been mentioned earlier in some of the letters and comments that were made earlier? Would you revise it, in other words?
That's a good question. When I read that activity review that was done, that activity review covered everything from timber theft to accountability to on-the-ground administration, and the letter, and I think all those things need to be addressed. In other words, the activity review addressed it. And so I think that we as a borough, where I was coming from, we as a borough also need to be concerned about all aspects of it, not just certain aspects, of it. And thinking about it, when I wrote it, I was looking at it from the standpoint that I'd like to know for myself, where really are these folks at, and what actions have been taken. And rather than to accuse them, whether to say, because I don't know. And so I thought it was an excellent place to start, and as you heard earlier, I think we can go farther later, but I think we need to, have a starting point and to see what kind of response we get back. I don't want to accuse, I'm not in the accusatory mode, to anybody. I just like to know the facts first.
Thank you.
Any other member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be nice if we were going to send a letter out that we could get some type of reply, like within 2 weeks or a month. I mean, my biggest fear with a pretty tame letter is that it's going to go to somebody's desk and it'll just sit there for a while until they think we've lost interest in looking for the next shiny object to come by. But I think we need to have it like a date that we can follow up this letter on, so that if they're not really taking it seriously, which I hope they do, that we have more recourse, whether we follow this up with a resolution. I mean, I think the resolution has more teeth than a letter to the Forest Service, but I would like to be able to track this thing so we can see if this person has received it and read it, and if these people that are listed in the CCs down here, they've had an opportunity to read it and respond to it, so that we can know that there's being progress made, as opposed to just kind of sitting on our thumbs trying to sort it out.
Any other discussion, Member Lynn?
Yeah, I heard that comment earlier, and I somewhat agree. I think we need to, from my perspective, my thinking is that we revisit. If we don't get a response, and I was given it longer, you won't get a response in 2 weeks. But if we didn't have a response, and I'm just picking the date, by the 1st of January I was looking, then I think we need to go further on it. But I throw that out, I know you're not going to get one, maybe in a month you probably could. But I partly agree with you. But I think we can do that without changing the content of the letter, and then agree to follow up at that point down the road.
Does anybody think it would be beneficial to invite Dave Zimmerman to our first meeting in December to ask him if there's any, if he knows if there's any movement on the letter? Or should we just pick a date if we don't get an answer, just to send another, form of encouragement with him to do something?
Thank you, Mayor. I got a question. Typically, when these letters go back there, do they have any responses, though they opened it up and even looked at it? I think this is maybe covering it. Maybe if I'm following what Jeff's saying, is there any way that we know that they got the letter and they read it, and then they would then give us some indication that they'll do some sort of work on it at some particular time? Or do we just...
What kind of response you'll get back? It will be logged in, and it will require action back there. How quick, I can't answer that. I don't know. I want to go back to something that the mayor said. I do think we need some follow-up some point down the road if we don't get a response. But if you're going to ask for somebody to come here, I think we got to go higher myself in the organization, at least for a supervisor. And maybe that's the next recourse. I'm not sure. I'm not at that point.
It'd be nice to get a response to our questions.
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, it would not be inappropriate for us to notify our federal lobbyist with a copy of this letter, and that's what you're paying him to do, is to follow up on this. In other words, you don't have to, he will.
That's a good point. So we can CC Brad Gilman as well. Member Mewtwo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Inviting Earl Stewart here, just to kind of keep a dialogue open with him, at least express to him some of our personal concerns that we have about what we think is going on, and just if he can help us, just if we're not pushing it to the right door, help us get to that point. And I think it would be great to have him stop by and make a short presentation.
Clerk Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to suggest if the Assembly would like to, we could add a paragraph into the letter requesting the Forest Service send us a note saying they have received our letter and that we will be getting a response. At least we know then someone physically has it and will be working on it.
That'd be great.
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And then we could also then put the CC on here to Gilman too at the same time. So
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So if we vote no on this now, then we'll just rewrite it and bring it to her again, right?
Well, we'll just, I intend to vote yes on sending it with the changes that we made.
Okay. Make amendments and then, okay.
Yeah. So is everybody in favor of those two changes we made, sending a letter or another paragraph asking for a response that they have received this correspondence from us, and they're going to respond to us, and then add our federal lobbyists under the list of people to be mailed to? Everybody in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We change it then and send it out as changed. Okay, that brings us to PMC Health Professional Shortage Area Designation Request. Phil, would you like to just step up and explain this? Was that your intention, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly. Phil Hofstetter with Petersburg Medical Center. So I've been trying to work with the state primary care office since August to obtain something called a health professional shortage area designation. It's fairly typical in rural communities to obtain this designation, and what it allows is the opportunity to apply for funding, loan or repayment for professionals such as physicians. I was kind of surprised that Petersburg has never applied for the designation, and when I did go and apply for it, we do not meet the requirements according to the state primary care office. Part of the reasoning is we don't qualify under the auto program. If we were something like a federally qualified healthcare clinic or a certified rural health clinic, those things would automatically qualify you. If you were a tribal facility, it would also qualify you. So having the standard calculation, I don't know exactly why, but one of the reasons we have we have a primary care office, a primary care clinic in our hospital, so the 3 physicians also do other things, and this is specific to a primary care designation. In any case, to be able to apply for this designation, and as an exception, I have to obtain a letter of recommendation from officials to the governor, and the governor then has to recommend to the primary care office to apply for that designation. Seems like a lot of hoops to jump over, but the funding is pretty significant if we can get some of these opportunities. And just to give you an example, we have a physician that's very interested in coming to Petersburg Medical Center from another area, and they have a federal loan repayment program. If Petersburg Medical Center does not have that, then they're disqualified from coming for that loan repayment program. So it might seem benign, but it's a pretty significant thing for a small facility, and that's the reason for the request in front of you.
Okay, so you're asking us to write a letter then to the governor's office to requesting that we meet this criteria?
Yes.
Can you draft something up, Debbie, to have at the next meeting?
It's in the packet already. So.
Oh, it is? Oh, that's the next.
Oh, yeah, there's a letter I drafted, and then there's a...
Oh, that's okay.
There's a recommendation.
So I would entertain a motion to forward this letter to Governor Walker, even though he won't be governor after tomorrow,
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Member Stanton Greger, seconded by Member Lynn. So we're just voting on approval to send this letter. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, thank you. At the work session we had the other day, I remember, my main question for you is how, we're all in agreement we need to work towards different things to help you guys at the medical center hospital, but wanting to know specifically how we can do that. These are things that we can do, so when you stumble across them or think of them, bring them here, because this is a no-brainer, obviously. Every little bit helps in trying to build this community hospital. So thank you for bringing this here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Mayor? Yes.
Does the Assembly have any objection to us involving Ray Matuszewski on this as well, from a follow-up perspective?
No, it would probably be good to send it to our lobbyist. Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of sending the letter, say aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you, Brandy. We will send the letter to the governor's office, whoever that may be. Next item on the agenda is Open Meetings Act training. I see there was no attachments, so I remember the last time we discussed this, the clerk was going to suggested we bring our borough attorney down, Sarah Heidemann, to do this. I had a different idea, but I'd entertain a motion to approve this training. Is that what we're trying to do, Debbie? It's just a picking a time to try to do it.
Yes, we budgeted for it. We talked about wanting to do it after the election, so here we are after the election. I'm just bringing it forward to you guys to see if you still want to do it and when we should do it and who should be doing the training.
I think the budgeted amount was in the $4,000 or $5,000 range.
$5,800.
$5,800?
Mm-hmm.
So I know, well, we better get a motion on the floor. Entertain a motion to spend the money that we fund and put in the budget for having someone come and give us Open Meetings Training Act here in Petersburg.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, who made the motion?
I did.
Member Bucci, and
Yes.
seconded by Member Lynn. Okay, any discussion?
I have a comment to make about this one.
Okay, Brandy, and then
I am not opposed to having some training, but for one, I think that we need to bring someone in that's non-biased. I think that part of the issue has been Ms. Heidemann has wavered on her her interpretation of the Open Meetings Act. So it would be nice to have someone that's not financially affiliated. I also don't think it's necessary to bring somebody in. I think that we're part of the Alaska Municipal League. They already have PowerPoints and other things in place. They could Skype in maybe. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
okay, thank you. Any other comments? I kind of felt the same way when we talked about this before. There's a gentleman that's an attorney that gives this training at Alaska Municipal League, Michael Gotti, and I called him up and asked him if he travels and does this kind of stuff, and he says he does, and if the price was roughly right around $5,800, which is a lot of money. But I was wondering if before we pulled the trigger on this and decided to do it, if we could reach out to Wrangle and maybe Cake and see if they could, if they wanted to come over, and if we did have someone actually physically come to town, and if we did, whoever we decide to bring in, maybe that would lessen our expense. So,
Sure.
I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. I don't know how we want to move forward with this.
I also thought, of course, we should invite all of our other boards and commissions as well to attend.
Hospital boards and school boards and, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Member Stanton Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, obviously, I'll be on board for whatever the Assembly decides, but when we talked about this however many months back it was, my stance is still the same. I don't think we should spend money on that. I think it's every member's individual responsibility to learn about the open meetings rules. They're pretty clear and pretty straightforward. You can hop online right now and find a book that lines out what you can and cannot do. Really clear. I don't see it as a great thing in the least. So I can't vote for this right now. I think it's my responsibility to make sure I'm not breaking the law. So I'll be voting no in general on this.
Any other discussion? And refresh my memory, there's been a lot of items on the agenda today. There was a motion to approve spending the money to bring someone here, and then we're...
You mean what we're talking about right now or in the budget?
Yes, right now. I remember that. I know the budget.
Yes, there was a motion, yes, I don't know what was the motion that was made.
Who was the maker of the motion? I know you have that.
It was Jeff.
It was me. The intent of the motion was to have an open meeting act training here and bringing Sarah Heidemann here to conduct the training for the assembly members and our boards and commissions.
Okay, so did you pick up on that, Brandy? That was the intent of the motion by Member Mucci was to have training in Petersburg and have our attorney provide the training. So.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, all right. Now I've got it. So, Member Lynn, do you have a...
Just a question, since I wasn't here for the original discussion, what was the background of
Just some of the assembly members haven't, like Member Stanton Gregor said, you could go online and find the documents and read them, and it's pretty cut and dried, but to have someone that works in this and deals with the open meetings come and give the training, and that's why I suggested Michael Gotti, because he's been giving the training for the 10 years I've been on the council/assembly, and so he's familiar with it. But then the motion right now is to bring Sarah Heidemann down. Member Stanton.
Follow-up, Member Lynn. To clarify, you're asking the background of why this topic is on the agenda?
Yes.
Because one Member Morrell had felt there was some open meetings violations in terms of emails being sent in the borough. Now, I forgot how many months ago that was that Brandy brought that up in a meeting, and the conversation spawned from that. Just for historical context for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Also,
Thompson.
Mayor Jensen, I just wanted to let everyone know, if they aren't already aware, that new member Norheim will be attending the Open Meetings Act training this month.
Right.
At AML.
Next week.
Yes.
So anyway, the motion is to have our attorney come and give us Open Meetings Act training. So, and then, if there's no other discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Mark?
No.
Randy?
No.
Jay?
No. Okay, it fails with a 5-1 vote. So we still have that money budgeted, but I'm sure it can be used for something else or just carried over. Communications, we have a few communications here today. I don't think I will read the letter from Secretary, the letter to Secretary Pompeo, but it is actually from Lisa Murkowski, Dan Sullivan, Don Young, Bill Walker, and Byron Malott, our congressional delegation back in Washington, D.C., and our governor and former lieutenant governor. And what it does is just asking them to move forward with discussions with Canada on the transboundary river issues. And I think this letter is available obviously on the agenda, so if people want to read it. That is one communication that I just wanted people to see. There's a thank you letter from the governor's office. Trey Atkinson, the CEO from SEPA, has been appointed to the governor's committee, if they carry it through the next governorship, to look at a roadless rule exemption, or state-specific one. He is on that committee. And then there's a letter from our lobbyist we got the other day that I thought was a little bit interesting, because last year when we were back in D.C., we talked to him, and I've talked to Senator Sullivan about it, and I'm not sure if the Assembly has addressed this at the Assembly level, but it was a regulation that would the existing EPA rule imposing Clean Water Act discharge rules on fishing, fish processing, and fish tender vessels in the normal course of operations will be permanently terminated with this new legislation in D.C., and we have been pursuing a final fix on these rules for over a decade. But what they're doing now is potentially the fishing industry will be exposed to ballast water discharge regulations. The extent of the regulations and their severity are unclear at this time. The regulatory process is likely to last 2 or more years. The definition of ballast is fairly broad. It could cover both refrigerated seawater and ice used in fishing holds. So it might limit you to discharging those waters. They might need to be treated to a certain level. So one problem appears to be fixed, another problem replaces it. We will let you know how the vote goes and keep you informed going forward. I've copied the mayor because he had expressed an interest in this fate of the EPA rule to me directly last time he was in D.C., which was last December or January. So anyway, I just would like to ask, and he is keeping an eye on it and keeping us informed, so I thought it could affect our industry, our fishing industry in town. One other letter that we all received, I believe, you sent this to the entire Assembly, is just a letter from Petro Incorporated about the proposed land swap we're talking about. And the last paragraph in this letter, in the land swap, we'd owe them some money, but they would forgive that payment to them, and if the money went towards a dolphin, if I understand the swap right. But if after, in this letter it says, if after 30 months from closing the land exchange, the Berthing Dolphin project has not achieved full funding, Petro would request that the net proceeds be applied to its remaining lease payments. Parcel 1, Parcel C and D upland easement, Parcel C and D submerged easement with the borough until exhausted. So that's just a letter I thought we should all be aware of. Assembly discussion items is the next item on the agenda, and there 17A is recognitions. Is there any recognitions by Assembly or staff? Yep. Member Lynn.
Yeah, I'd like to, last week, Assemblymember Norheim and I took a tour of the of the harbor, particularly the maintenance parts of it, and with Ben Hine. And I have to tell you that, well, first of all, I thank Ben for his time with us, but I was pretty well impressed with everything that I saw out there in his facilities, where everything was clean, everything was put in a place, it was well kept, and I really appreciated, the enthusiasm that he has for what he's doing, and I just want to compliment him and the crew for all the maintenance. It really is well kept.
Okay, thank you. Any other recognitions? Member Walter?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to the police department for their Halloween night there. I heard from my kids that they were out and about on the streets, even mingling with the public and giving out glow sticks and things like that. And I think that's a great idea, instead of about arresting people in public. So I think it's great.
I'd also like to recognize Captain Randy Holmgren. He's the new captain for the police department. I'd also like to recognize Guy Lynn Etcher for putting on the haunted house and all the volunteers that participated. There's no way any of us could have put on the haunted house without that group of people. I mean, they worked really hard putting it all together, and we were able to get it taken down with no damage to the facility or anything like that. And I'd also like to recognize all the officers that were out and about that night and their friends and family that showed up to help participate and hand out the glow sticks, and it was a great time. My kids actually want to do that again next year instead of going trick-or-treating. So
nice. Is there any other recognitions by staff or assembly? Okay, that moves us to the next discussion item, and I asked to put this on the agenda just because I was in the manager's office and we were having a conversation, and he showed me this proposal by Air Medcare Network Municipal Site Membership, and what it is it would cover everybody in Petersburg for medevac insurance, but it comes with a fee of $14,400. So I thought we'd just put it on the agenda just to have a discussion about it, and thought maybe in the future if we were going to invite people from this organization, but I see they're in the audience, so I guess since they're here, if anybody wants to ask them any questions, I don't feel it would be inappropriate. Any questions of the people offering this service?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, are they prepared to do a small presentation at this point so the public can hear about it?
I have no idea.
Just ask questions. So, I mean, what sort of services? I think I heard a little blurb on the radio there that you have to have health insurance before this will even apply to you. So, I mean, what would that do to the citizens in town that don't have, health insurance? Would they be able to be flown out on this, or what would the cost be for that? So,
yes, yeah, please. The question. I don't know if we want a full presentation. No, it could be at another meeting, but
So my name is Riley Little. I'm representing Guardian Flight. To answer your question, Assembly Member, we do not require insurance. We're the only provider in the state of Alaska that does not require insurance to be a member. The way that our particular municipal site plan is written for Petersburg, the person who would be 100% uninsured without even, say, workman's comp or auto insurance or something like that, which would be applicable, would be billed at the Medicare allowable rate, which is substantially discounted from the private party single payer rate. However, for $65 a month, they could enroll in the full membership and get that full balance billing coverage.
So with this 14,000 or some odd dollars, is that I'm really slow at this. Would they be covered under that policy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Member Lynn?
When you're, and I happen to be a member of yours, and I know quite other people in the area already are, but down in the fine print, it shows that it does not cover Medicaid employees or Medicaid enrollees. Would that be the case here, so that if in the borough, if you have Medicaid people, would your policy cover those people?
So that's kind of a tricky key spot because they don't need coverage. If someone is covered 100% Medicaid, we're going to bill Medicaid that same rate whether or not they have a membership. So say if this person is 100% Medicaid and they come to me and they want to spend $125 on a membership, I have to legally tell them no. Don't waste your money on this membership because you're wasting your money.
And so, and I also saw in your thing where you said $65 difference. So what would the additional $65 from each of the families in town buy them?
So the base rate with the $14,355 will cover any flights out of the borough of Petersburg. And then if they go to Anchorage and have to get flown farther, that'll still be covered. But so with the coverage, it's kind of a condensed exposure for us of flights leaving the borough. Then individual families can go ahead and cover with the full network coverage for that $65. That'll get them the full balance billing coverage, as well as coverage in 38 states, including Hawaii, from 300 and some other bases that are sister companies.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry for folding in there. Okay, so how do we, I guess there are some liability questions here we need to talk about later, but when you come back in and if somebody calls for it, it would have to be, the contract would be a full resident of the Petersburg Borough, no matter where they lived in the borough.
Yes, sir.
So that if we had a visitor, that wouldn't be covered, but you may not know that. Or
visitor?
Let's say that you had somebody off a cruise ship, what I was thinking of, and they weren't covered. Yeah. You know, they happened to be here, but they needed to be medevaced out.
We wouldn't work that into the price of the overall coverage because that would drive the price up to cover those visitors. So the price is just covering the residents. The people that from the 2010 census, that number is what we go off of. And so essentially people who are receiving mail here will be covered.
So maybe at this point it'd be, the borough manager should research this a little bit. I mean, have you looked into it, Steve? What's your opinion on it? Is it worth it for the borough? I mean, I think...
If I may.
Yeah.
I also listened to them when they came to town, and it was intriguing enough to, tell them back that, clearly this is a budgetary issue for us, and that, it'd be best left for when the assembly, we had a full assembly here to talk about it. So that's kind of where we left it. I mean, the big question, and this is one of the things I was similar with the assembly, is trying to find out some more information, such as, using Bob's example. Bob is already a Guardian Flight member. So if the borough did this, should Bob keep his Guardian Flight membership or drop it?
He could go ahead and then pay that $65 a year personally if you wanted the full network coverage. But if you were only seeking coverage from the borough, so you don't travel much, then you wouldn't need to pay anything out of pocket at all.
So that's the piece that I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make sure. So if the borough went forward with it, we'd be paying $65 per person, and they would have coverage here if they needed air vac.
If I may.
Sure, please.
The household rate is actually $12.50 a household.
Oh.
So it adds up to that $14,000.
Oh, thank you. So, and then if I wanted to add on the national coverage, I'd pay personally another $65, but that would be an individual decision.
Yes, sir. And that $65 would cover all the individuals under that roof within all of our network. The current record is in Kentucky, there are 26 individuals covered with that. It's the coal territory.
So, I mean, it's clearly an intriguing thing to do, but it's a budgetary thing, right? And I can't, especially right now. That's why I suggested you guys need to talk about it. You have to set, back to the budgetary thing, you have to set the priorities and tell us what you want to fund and what you want to do.
It's intriguing, but there's a cost associated with it.
And Mr. Mayor and Assemblyman, I would be more than willing to come back and do a presentation or answer more questions at any point in time. I am the Southeast Region Marketing Director, so any time that there be questions, I'd be more than willing to come down.
Okay, and do you have the gentleman's contact info?
Yes, I do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next item under some of the discussion items is C, in the solid waste recycling work session. Member Mucci put this on, asked for this to be on the agenda.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm hoping to have a work session sometime in either early December or late November, just to kind of go over where we're headed with the solid waste program, the recycling program, composting program. Right now, we've got Public Works is doing composting, we've got PIA is doing some composting, and I think there's some interest in the community to start a small composting business in town. And with the issues we're having with the baler, I think it'd be interesting to see where we're headed with this. If there's things that we can do to remove and reduce some of the recyclables out of the waste stream and make sure the community understands what they can and cannot recycle. I'm hoping that maybe we can get the city clerk to send out a note to see who's available in the next several weeks, if not to the middle of December, to just an hour and a half, one night early in the week on a night that we're not meeting.
Okay, sure, I can do that.
Thank you. Any new discussion items? Entertain a motion to adjourn. So move. All those in favor say aye. Aye.